I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been torn, but I'm keeping on check. And I've been broken.
Good afternoon, good evening. This is Dov Tuzman. You're back on Equal Footing. Once again, out of studio, we are in the western U.S. looking at this beautiful vista. It's still daylight out here in Park City, Utah. And we're talking about something going on tonight on the other side of the world, or at least referring to the other side of the world, the Gaza Strip. Unless you had your head in the sand or living under a rock, you couldn't have missed Tuesday's announcement, the ramifications from the seismic announcement from President Trump in a press conference on Tuesday with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, where he said the U.S. would, quote, take over the Gaza Strip and, quote, own it, unquote, promoting really a continuation of a promotion of an idea that Trump has been promoting since really before he went into office, but really on an accelerated pace since assuming office, that the Palestinian people should effectively live elsewhere, although it's got him back and forth through that. Netanyahu at the same time said the Palestinians in Gaza should not go through a process of rebuilding, I'm sorry, that's a Trump quote, and Trump went on to say that they've lived a miserable existence there. Probably one of the most quoted turns of phrase was Trump referring to changing the Gaza Strip into the Riviera of the Middle East. Wow. Now, some people say it's just bluster. It's negotiating bluster. It's par for the course. Don't take it seriously. For others, and I would say the majority of folks, it does signal a meaningful change in U.S. foreign policy directionality. There have been reactions across the Arab world, across our allies in Europe. Some folks even in the Republican Party saying that it was a bridge too far, a lot of resistance to the Democratic Party, and a split reaction in the American Jewish diaspora. I would say the diaspora globally, but we have the largest number of Jews in this country, in the United States, after Israel, of course, and you see the fault lines already. You have a lot of folks in the Frum community that are celebrating the announcement. Not everybody, but you do have a much larger group, and you have folks in the more secularized Jewish community in the U.S. that are fretting makes it sound like I'm making light of it, who are deeply concerned that this is something that, at its worst, represents the type of persecution that we as Jews have lived through for centuries, displacement, God forbid, ethnic cleansing. And so you've got very extreme reactions. Who do we turn to on this show when we have an issue like this that comes up that intersects the social, political, potentially the theological, and that is a very, very sticky wicket? Our go-to intellect and guide, eminent religious scholar, Rabbi Simon Jacobson, has agreed to be on with us again today. We're in the midst of this series on Jewish documentary filmmakers, which itself was really interesting, inspired by our attendance at the Sundance Film Festival again this year. And boy, did we make a right turn, Leah. Going to making sure that we were not avoiding anything. In the show we never like to avoid the tough stuff and shine a light on these types of issues through the prism of Jewish wisdom. Rabbi Jacobson, do we have you on?
Absolutely. I'm here with you, and totally ready to dive into this, what shall we say, definitely an upending proposal that promises to disrupt everybody. And let's go for it.
Rabbi, usually I go through an introduction. I feel like you're someone who doesn't require an introduction. Obviously, you're one of the world's most eminent religious scholars. You're such you're an inspirational voice and a teacher for Jews across the spectrum, even for non-Jews. You do a lot of interfaith work. Obviously, the author of Towards a Meaningful Life, which is really one of the most important, I think, publications quotations of Jewish wisdom from the Rebbe, but in general, Jewish wisdom of the 20th century. And I want to start by asking you, your Meaningful Life Center. You offer classes online and in person. I'm one of your devotees and listen to your work. I'm wondering how much inbound you're getting since the announcement on Tuesday. Does this type of thing, when this type of things happen, do people go elsewhere for the guidance? They're looking for, their favorite Jewish newspaper and seeing what they should think, or talking to, is it within the family? Are they reaching out to you saying, Rabbi, what am I supposed to think? Help me out. I'm wondering to what extent people are reaching out to you for guidance on something that's by nature political.
Well, yes, because I have a big following, thank God. We're talking about over 300,000 subscribers on YouTube and literally millions of views. And this is both Jews and non-Jews and secular Jews and observant religious. It really crosses all the demographics. So being that following is a large one, whenever there's a controversial topic that dominates the headlines, I definitely start getting a lot of email, a lot of text, a lot of social media comments. And I usually respond, which is one of the reasons I agreed to go on the program, because I know that everyone's talking about it, and it's interesting how you frame it. I like to look at things, outside of the usual stereotypical politics. That people who hate Trump obviously are going to hate any idea that he suggests, especially a radical idea like this. The people who love Trump either can wrap their head around this, or they can't. So I don't want to go into get into that type of partisanship, and I think you agree with that. I think, how do you look at this? I think we have to look at it from many angles altogether. We're sophisticated people. I think political is one side of it, but you have to also look at it, the region. As a Jew and someone who deeply loves Israel, obviously, and frankly, I love all people, and I cannot stand when anyone dies. And when I see the Gazans suffering, it breaks all our hearts. So I think from that context, I speak for myself right now as a Jew. From a Torah point of view, you have to look at it from a moral perspective, from a religious perspective, from a political perspective, and a practical perspective, and a psychological one as well. When you start getting caught up in the partisan politics of it, you lose sight of everything. Then it just becomes, Trump said it. It's crazy. You can't do such a thing. You mentioned ethnic cleansing. I, by the way, disagree with you on one aspect. I don't think it's just broken down by religious are like the idea and the secular don't, the secular Jews. I know many secular Jews that actually found this to be very interesting and positive idea. So I just wanted to just qualify that. I don't know if that you can really reflect on that. In other words, suggesting that religious Jews are more radical in the sense and are ready to do this, and the secular are more liberal and what some would call more humane. So just wanted to comment on that.
Yeah,
so with
Rabbi,
that said, my answer is yes.
If I could throw in a brief interruption, I agree with you, by the way. I was just saying that, in terms of the majority of the numbers, more Orthodox Jews support the initiative in the SNAP polls that have only a couple of SNAP polls that have been done since Tuesday, and more secular Jews are opposed to it. But you're absolutely right that on both sides of the fence there's differing points of view. In fact, I saw earlier today, Rabbi, that the group, the cohort in the United States that is most supportive of Trump's announcement that the U.S. would take over the Gaza Strip is the evangelist Christian group, and by a pretty wide margin. It was almost 20% higher than in self-described Orthodox or modern Orthodox Jewish groups. So there's all sorts of surprising reactions.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'd love to weigh in from those different perspectives, and I think we also have to keep another thing in mind. Trump in his classic style throws out something, just like he spoke about the Panama Canal or Greenland and so on. He throws out something. He's not necessarily this is his final position. Like, does it mean that when he used the word the United States will own Gaza? What does that mean? Who owns Gaza now? They're just taking over? And people right away know, are they going to send boots in, the military in? Is this going to be a forced evacuation? I don't think we know. I don't even think Mr. Trump himself has it all worked out in detail. So I look at it more what he's done.
Well, Secretary Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, did say earlier today, that he was not discarding the possibility of U.S. troops of military action. So there was additional clarification and buttressing of the announcement on Tuesday.
Yeah, but we don't know whether they actually committed to doing that either. I don't think it's that simple, you know. Let me tell you about
I agree. In fact, Rabbi, when you watch the press conference, I don't know how you feel about it. And I want to say up front, and you and we spoke for a few minutes before the start of the show, but not much. I actually don't know yet how I feel about this. I've got a lot of mixed feelings about it, and I'm keeping an open mind and not trying to put a partisan have a partisan view of it. I was just wondering if you saw the video of the press conference, and to me, it looked as if Netanyahu was actually surprised. But I'm sure there was some signaling of what he was going to say. But just reading body language, it seemed to me like this. To your point, that probably Trump himself doesn't yet know exactly what the ramifications of this announcement mean. It looked like that Netanyahu was surprised, and so anyhow, this is something else.
Netanyahu actually said he said we always want to demilitarize Gaza and make it a safe place, but I never took it that far. Mr. Trump is taking it to another level. I think he even used those words. So let me tell you, Dov, what I think, my feeling on the matter as soon as I heard about it and started thinking about it. You know, the first knee-jerk reaction most of us have, this is crazy. You know, you're going to suddenly come solve the problem of wars that have been fought for decades, if not centuries, and you just have this quick solution. You know, you're talking about a Hamas who barbarically attacked Israel, don't want to surrender, let alone they haven't returned the hostages. We're not talking about a neutral situation. Yeah, but on the other hand, that's our knee-jerk reaction because it doesn't seem like this is the way to go. It doesn't seem conventional. But then I think to myself, you know what? No one ever thought the Abraham Accords were possible, and they did happen. Maybe Mr. Trump has something going here because he's an outsider. He's not an insider. No insider Washingtonian would ever have suggested something like this because they're so entrenched in the regular way of doing politics. So I right away said, you know what? I don't know how this is going to pan out, but it definitely puts everybody right now is on alert to think about it. You know, do you have a better solution? Yeah. The fact is, Gaza.
Well, you're absolutely right. Pardon the interruption. It stirs the pot vigorously, and it's right. Interesting. You know, even today I was talking to someone who's a very secular Jew. In fact, he considers himself very Jewish cultured, but is atheist and would never look to theological guidance. And he was repulsed by the announcement. And I said, "Well, what do you think is the solution?" And he didn't really have a formulated idea. But what was interesting about the conversation is, for the first time in a while, talking to him about this type of topic, he realized he needed to find a position. He needed to have a position, because if you are really strongly repulsed by it and you believe in a two-state solution, for example, and then what's the pathway? What's the critical path? What alternative are you offering?
Right.
Rabbi, we're going to need to take our first break. I wanted to mention that I'm looking on the screen in front of me at a Jewish News Syndicate poll that was published yesterday. It says that 80% of Israelis, I'm talking about the Jewish American diaspora, agree with President Trump's plan to forcibly expel Palestinians from Gaza. That's an amazing number in itself. That's a much higher percentage of support of Benjamin Netanyahu or any political faction within Israel. We're here with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. We are talking about the seismic announcement that President Trump made on Tuesday in the press conference, the White House with Prime Minister Netanyahu, about the U.S.'s plan to, quote unquote, take over the Gaza Strip and, quote unquote, own it. We never shy away from the tough stuff on this program. We expect you don't either. Call in. We are live until 8 p.m. Eastern. We want to know your opinion. Ask Rabbi Jacobson for his wisdom as we are doing so. And the number to call is 718-303-9090. That's live, 718-303-9090. Please be patient since we're out of studio. We say just keep letting it ring. We will get to you. And if you want to text or WhatsApp in a question or comment, you can do that to a different number. Please don't call this number. Text 917-428-4062. That's 917-428-4062. And we'll be right back.
It ain't me. It ain't me. I ain't no senator song. It ain't me. It ain't me. I ain't no fortunate one.
So 2025, still relatively new year. We are doing something. We have been doing something new, Leah. Right? We're trying to get our program to be more listener supported and a little bit less corporate supported.
And we have established our Patreon website where you can follow and donate directly, and all proceeds go to a better production of the show. Go to www.patreon.com/Equal Footing with Dov Tasman, and you can see behind-the-scenes videos and interviews and pay-per-view content. So that fully supports us.
Yeah, and you can also go to the Patreon app, Patreon, on your iPhone or your Android device, and just put in Equal Footing with Dov Tasman. And we do some pretty cool content there. We do some stuff that is not, necessarily allowed on air just because, the nature of FCC regulation. I'm not talking about anything too piquant, but we go deeper into the issues and hear maybe opinions sometimes that people aren't necessarily comfortable having in the live format. It's pretty fun stuff, and we would love your support at any level that you feel comfortable with. So check out patreon.com, Equal Footing with Dov Tasman.
Follow us there.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on check.
Rabbi, I want to give you a hypothetical. You have someone who's been a listener and a student of yours in your Meaningful Life Center for some time, and they reach out to you after this announcement by President Trump and say, I just have not really been paying attention to politics much. I don't have an opinion about U.S. politics. I don't know if I'm Republican or Democrat, but this announcement really strikes home for me. And, Rabbi, I don't know what to think. Is there any halachic guidance? Is there any theological guidance that can help me process what I just heard, that we, being the U.S., is going to take over the Gaza Strip and expel some significant percentage of the Palestinian people to, expand, who knows, extend the state of Israel or to build the Riviera of the Middle East. How should I react, Rabbi? What do you tell this person?
Well, I want to go back to where I began, which was, let's get politics out of it. People who've told me that Trump is going to put Jews in concentration camps, you could imagine when they hear this, they hear Trump now putting Palestinians into concentration camps. I don't feel that way at all. So let me make that 100% clear. The way you framed it even, I would frame it very differently. You go to Gaza right now, and a big part of it is uninhabitable. It's been bombed out. I'm not even getting into who you want to blame for it. I blame Hamas, obviously, because they used the Gazans as human shields, and they don't really care. Even today, they don't care. And they allowed that to happen. A lot of it is bombed out. There are tunnels, miles and miles of tunnels that I'm sure have impacted the infrastructure and the stability of building anything there. So you can see Trump's suggestion as being the most humanitarian thing altogether. You can approach it very simple. Here's a strip of land that has 2 million people who really can't rebuild as long as they live there. So he's suggesting let's voluntarily let them move somewhere for the time being, and then build it out in a proper way. And of course, when they come back, you don't want terrorists coming back. You don't want criminals. So you can argue if it was anywhere else in the world, and that it's a mostly humanitarian effort. And there's nothing about it that is even controversial. The problem is, obviously, that there are many factors and factions, I should say, that don't want that. Hamas for sure doesn't want that. The Arab countries don't want it because you can make the argument that the Palestinians have become a very convenient way of making trouble for Israel. Why does Egypt and Jordan, why are they so against taking in their own brothers and sisters? So if you go with that approach, then this may be a very humane, maybe the best solution of all. Now, I look at it even deeper than that. Nobody has come up with a better plan. Meanwhile, what you find is in the West Bank and in Gaza, you find, same thing with south of Lebanon, you find militants. Extremists have taken over. And they became proxies of Iran. And it could be that the way you have to look at it is like out of the box, a whole new approach. And on the contrary, let people come up with an alternative. Is the alternative to just allow these poor people and wretched people to be taken advantage of by their militant minorities? Is that the alternative, to leave things as they are? So I think Trump has done a big favor to us all by at least suggesting, let it be radical, let it be crazy even. So now, let Saudi Arabia, let Jordan, let Egypt, let the Americans. So I don't look at it as a takeover of Gaza. I know Trump used the word ownership. I don't know what he meant by that. I think he meant ownership more like we will be heading the real estate development. He clarified that he doesn't even want America to pay for it. He wants the Arab world to pay for it. So I see it more like heading a development. Now, yes, initially it sounds crazy because is real estate going to solve the problem here? But you know what? Now on the table is a new alternative presented by the President of the United States, the most powerful country on earth, and people know that Trump can be radical, and now it forces everyone to maybe start thinking for solutions that are equally viable. That's how I would say,
Rabbi,
anyone who came to me.
I let that go on because I felt like it was very interesting, and I hope several things you said prompted other questions for me. But to be fair, I don't think you answered my original question, which was a hypothetical. I'm in character. I'm Shmuley, and I've been digesting the Meaningful Life Center content for years, and I'm going to you for spiritual guidance. In fact, I came in non-political. And I'm asking, is there halachic guidance or theological guidance? And maybe the answer is no. But, in character, the
answer is yes.
I want to know if there's somewhere I can go in Chumash or Midrash or somewhere where I can get something that'll help me process what's going on and form my opinion. It's not in the political sphere.
What I just said was informed exactly by theological and spiritual underpinnings, which I will explain now. When I speak to people that come to me for the Meaningful Life Center, I don't always quote all my sources. I tell them, based on the sources that I know, so I gave you a perspective to look at it. Now, you want to know what the theological sources for it are, the number one and single most important thing, the preservation of life. Peace, shalom. It says the whole Torah was given just to bring peace to this world. So the goal here is a mutual peace where people from all walks of life, and in this case, Israel, Palestinians, Gazans, everyone, can live. What is the best way to find a peaceful resolution where people's dignity is preserved? That is the single most important driving force, and that in turn has to be translated into some type of strategic plan. So the question then is, what is the Torah's way of looking at war? What happens if you're attacked by an enemy? You just turn the other cheek because you're always looking for peace? The answer is absolutely no. Because if you have an enemy, you have to protect yourself. There's the concept of pikuach nefesh, protecting yourself. Hamas attacked Israel. They declare war on Israel. So does Iran. So Israel has no choice, not because we like war. Now, there are many civilians here and many innocent people that are now, they're collateral damage. I don't want to know, I can't say who's innocent, who's not, because I haven't done any counting. But what do you do with people who are being used by others. Hamas is using human shields. Their centers of attack are in hospitals and in kindergartens and among the civilian population. They have hostages they've taken. So things get thorny. So the real approach I would take, here's Trump is coming with a suggestion. Suggestion is, here's a way to create a sustainable, peaceful situation. Yes, it's a radical suggestion, but long term, this is ultimately the goal, is that every Arab or Palestinian, just like in Israel itself, I just spoke actually to a doctor I know in an Israeli hospital. He's a Palestinian. He's an Arab Israeli citizen. And he has his feelings. He's not pro-Israel, but he's very successful, and he has all the rights. So I see no reason why the Gazans, the Palestinians that live there, can't live in a peaceful way and follow the law of the land without terrorism. So the question is, how do you reach that place? Now, if everybody had that in mind, if every country, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and all the countries of the world would say, let us find a way to create peace, and they have a solution, I think Trump's suggestion has to be looked at. I don't know whether it's exactly the way he's suggesting it and what variations. So the theological
and I think to be fair, that's what his suggestion is changing by the day, and I don't actually mean that in a negative way. I mean that in a positive way, in the sense that you got to be careful if you're judging what you heard, and then you're not kind of staying on the news, because there's been a number of additional clarifications, and I imagine that's how solutions get worked out, right? You put it on an idea, and there's pushback, and you work things out. There's been, for example, a walking back of the military involvement. You talked about who would pay for it. The ownership comment seems to have been clarified a little bit, or at least it's on its way to clarification.
So I don't think we should be drawing any conclusions. Well, why should we be jumping to conclusions? An idea has been put out there.
I agree with you.
Exactly. So now, let me put it this way. Trump has I think what he's done, the gift he's given us, he's now forcing others come up with a better solution. I've given a solution.
I agree with
you don't like it?
In fact, I think there's an argument, Rabbi, that even if you are the most stolidly anti-Trump person, and you are on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of how you see peace evolving. You said that theological guidance is around shalom and around peace and around preservation of life. And let's say you think it should be done in a completely different way. Well, as you're saying, I agree with 100%. You are being forced now to present your solution in a practical way. To be fair, just like the White House is being forced. The media is asking a lot of correct questions. The Arab world is pushing back and, interestingly, accepting certain concepts around. So you don't get to a solution without being bold and putting out some idea and being willing to be wrong. And I think that, as someone who you know over the years, Rabbi, I tend to be a little bit middle of the road. I see things from different perspectives, and definitely not radically on either side of the U.S. political spectrum. I think one thing you've got to give Trump credit for to some degree, oddly, because people will say the opposite, because say he's a megalomaniac, which, by the way, he very well may be, but he, in a weird way, is willing to be wrong. Because you're willing to say something you're going to get a ton of crap for, you're going to get a ton of pushback, you're going to have a lot of people saying you're crazy. I mean, former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, in an interview today, said that on the day that I will see American soldiers coming in great numbers to Gaza, I will then make my mind how serious it is. Basically went on to say, as have others in Israel, that Trump was coming from outer space, putting in place solution ideas that were completely detached from reality. Well, you know what? By doing so, you weirdly actually ground the conversation. You invite critique. So I think there's something to be lauded there.
Look, if you take politics out of the picture altogether and personalize attacks and character assassination, let's take what Steve Jobs said. Only those that are crazy enough to believe they can change the world are the ones that do. What about the Wright brothers when they came up with an idea to have flying ships, which we call today airplanes? That was crazy. How do we defy gravity? You have tons of metal flying in the air, and today it's a whole industry. Every revolution, every change in history happened by a few people who were crazy enough to believe it's possible. So I know people don't like to call Trump that, but the fact of the matter is maybe his contrarian approach and his outsider personality is what is appealing, and that's why he won the election, because America, they may not be pro all his positions, but they are pro the fact that we need to shake up the status quo. The Middle East, I think we all can agree, is trapped in a vortex of a vicious cycle that nobody has found a solution to. So that someone should come with a bold new idea, yeah, fine. It could be a crazy idea.
But on the other hand, we do have to go to our next break. But on the other hand, Rabbi, I would say that type of suspending judgment needs to occur on both sides. So I think it's equally dangerous for someone to say, "Oh, I'm anti-Trump. Anything he says is bonkers and dangerous." And I think that's equally bad for someone to say, "I love Trump. He's the savior. Anything he says, I'm behind." I think we need to look at things, be calm.
No, I'm not coming from that, just for the record.
I know you're not.
That's not
Rabbi, I for sure, and I'm not saying you are. But I do know amongst our listeners we have both. We have folks that are really anti-Trump and folks that are really pro, and I think it's more important, what's the substance, what's being talked about, what progress are being made, what kind of conversations is it engendering, and by that metric alone, this announcement is having some positive impact because these conversations are happening. We're here with Rabbi Shimon Jacobson.
After the break, I want to add a few points as well.
Yes, sir, absolutely. We'll be right back.
Like it's your little toy. You put a gun in my hand, and you hide from my eyes, and you turn and run farther when the fast bullets fly.
Equal Footing with Dove Tasman is sponsored by MDCS Dermatology, your experts in skincare. With 2 Manhattan locations and 4 offices in Long Island, including Plainview and Commack, the dermatologists and skincare surgeons at MDCS are proud to be affiliated with the Albert Einstein College of Medicine and New York Presbyterian Hospital. So schedule your next skin exam in one of MDCS's convenient New York area locations. To make an appointment, go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-DERM. That's 212-661-3376. You could even schedule a virtual video visit with MDCS's board-certified dermatologists from the comfort and safety of your own home. So go to www.mdcs.live or call 212-661-3376. And don't forget to mention Equal Footing for 15% off all cosmetic procedures.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on to. And I've been told.
Rabbi, you wanted to interject. Go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to add a few points. It wasn't so much interjection. I think we're thinking very similarly. So let's make that clear. You know, there's another thing I always tell people when they ask me. You mentioned, from the Meaningful Life Center approach, which is above politics. Remember, long before Mr. Trump was born, and long before even George Washington was born, the United States became a country. We are here as a people for almost 4,000 years. We have perspective, starting with Abraham, perspective on God, on purpose, on life, on war, on good and evil, on all these topics. So I'm coming from that point of view. So even when we look at a leader like Trump, we look at him. Yes, he of course is a human being, can make mistakes, and can do good things. But at the end of the day, in a way, he's also an agent, a divine agent. We know there's an expression that the heart of kings and leaders are in the hands of God. And we always knew that, even the worst possible leaders throughout history. So I also look at it, he's in a position where it's bigger than the person. The seat he occupies, meaning President of the United States, is bigger than the person. And even if you don't like him, he can come up with an idea. I don't think the Abraham Accords, I have not heard, even those that hate Trump, they maybe downplay it, but they don't criticize it. What was wrong with the Abraham Accords? And if you can get Saudi Arabia,
what's wrong with countries declaring peace? How can you be against that?
Yeah, And I personally think it was a tremendously historical move that maybe he even deserved the Nobel Prize. If Arafat got the Nobel Prize, why didn't he? But that's fine. I'm not going to.
I agree with you. You know, Rabbi, I lived on and off in Dubai for almost a decade, and you saw it coming in a sense because you'd have on the DL Israeli visitors for business. They wouldn't stamp their passports. You had a lot of Jewish American tourists, but to take that to the next level, to make that something official, and then probably, if it wasn't for October 7th, you'd probably have peace between Saudi and Israel, normalized relations, and that's obviously
one of the reasons they attacked on October 7th. They wanted to upend that. So what I wanted to add, which I think is a very, very critical point here, and that is, I don't know if this is the calculation of Trump or not. I'm not even going into his head. But one thing for sure, right now, Saudi Arabia, I can assure you, and many of the Arab countries are having emergency meetings behind the scenes because they need to figure out what to do. Because if Trump, one thing is for sure, people are afraid of him. He could actually go ahead and do things that nobody would ever imagine. And that happens to work well. Iran, they're all thinking.
You know what's interesting, Rabbi, if you don't mind the interjection? I read an article in the New York Times last week. I mean, we're not talking about like 2 months ago, about how President Trump was in the arms of Saudi Arabia. How the Crown Prince had bamboozled him, said he was going to make all this investment, and because it was the first foreign visitor that Trump had or a foreign dignitary that Trump had met with or called after being inaugurated. Same thing as last time, and that he was a sucker, and that he was tied at the hip because of his family's financial interests. And then a week later, or less than a week later, you have an announcement that's frontally against, let's say, the foreign policy interests of Saudi Arabia. So, you got to give it to him in terms of being surprising.
Yeah, he definitely has. What we say, he has there's a more blunt word, but we'll call it guts. Let's put it that way. There's no question about it.
Rabbi, I had a cool question. Can I just ask you a quick listener's question?
Yeah, do you mind? Let me just finish my thought, and then you can ask me. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was going to say, so they're all right now having meetings. First of all, what happens if Trump really starts putting on pressure? Remember, Trump is the first president that's using American clout and stops and calling a spade a spade. We're the most powerful country, the biggest economy, and he's dictating terms, something that no president ever did. And for good reason they didn't do it. They never wanted to wield that stick. They didn't want to have be bullies. But let's say he starts behaving like a bully. They have to start thinking about that, and it could very well be that'll force them to come up with a solution that may not be perfect, but at least will shake up the status quo. And I think that's a big part of what's going on here. What's going on here is that we need to put our heads together. You love those Palestinians. You keep crying and saying how Israel is performing genocide and so on. So why don't we do something for them once and for all? Call them out on it. And that's what I personally come away with. When I'm thinking about it, I keep saying, call them out on it. So he came up with an idea. You don't like the idea? What are you going to do for these innocent 40, 50, 60,000 people that were killed in the last year? Instead of just blaming Israel and condemning them and calling for their arrest, what are you going to do about them? And that is, at the same time, the real thing. And Trump is pushing it, and for that, we have to give him credit, in my view.
I agree. Give credit where credit is due. Subtract credit where you should. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who said consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. And I think one of the problems we've got in the discourse, generally in this country and in the Jewish American diaspora, is this need to be consistently anti or pro a particular political party or person. And the reality is you could be pro certain things and anti other things. Like, I think this announcement is very interesting. I think it pushes the envelope in certain ways that are uncomfortable, that are being walked back a little bit. But like we've been talking about in this program, it forces a discussion that needs to be had and problem solving. Those emergency meetings in the Arab world, those are good. That should be happening. Whatever the outcome is, we'll at least know where people stand. Anyway, we'll get back to it. But on the other hand, some of the tariff stuff, talking about Canada being the 51st state, I think that's absurd. And on that point, Rabbi, I'm going to get to this listener's question. because I thought it was kind of cool. So Peter has a question for you, Rabbi, and says, why does everything always have to do with Jewish news? I get it. We're focused on what affects our community most directly, but can we please also have opinions on other things? Rabbi, what do you think about Trump's statement that Canada should be the 51st state?
I smile because when I hear questions like that, I think it's I don't want to draw any conclusions, but is this just another way of attacking Trump? Just finding something he said that you think is ludicrous? That's one I feel I don't even want to engage in that. So if this person met me one-on-one, and I would say, then why are you asking me this question? Do you want me just to join you in criticizing Trump? Is that what you're looking for, to find things to invalidate him? Or is there some deeper reason? So that's where I feel like I don't want to be pulled into this pro and anti-Trump debate that has, in my opinion, polarized so many people. I don't want to go there. I'm not even sure what his intentions are, Trump.
We're on live radio, so let's ask Peter, can you please call in? Or can you text in if you feel more comfortable and answer the rabbi's question? What's the deeper reason? Why are you asking this question? So let's see if Peter responds.
You just really care, you care about Canada? You want to protect Canada's rights or interests? Now, honestly, I will answer the question after that disclaimer. And my answer is this. I don't know Trump's intentions. I have no idea what he means. Does he actually mean that? Is it a bargaining tool to try to get some concessions from Canada? I'm not even sure what he's thinking. Because is that so simple to just create another state? Can Trump even do that without an amendment, without the Congress, without the Senate? I don't know what he means by it, to be honest. And I think he's not a stupid guy. He didn't just drop a line. I know he likes to say things that are radical, but probably he wants to some way twist Canada's arm. That's my thinking. But I'm not sure. I don't even know what he means with Greenland.
I know that President Trump is a teetotaler, but sometimes I wish that maybe we'd learn he was doing shrooms or something. Like, it's like some of the comments are like, "Wait, are you on a journey? What is it?"
No, he doesn't need that. I think he's naturally
right, exactly.
on a different
naturally on his journey. Rabbi, I
want
to go back for a minute. Sorry, can I redirect a little bit?
Let me just say this: Trump was elected by the country, not by all the country. Half the country elected him. A little more than half. Half, a little more. Not. Yeah, just a drop more. I'm not going to make it into a landslide. Well, fine. But he was elected by a big part of this country. No one's arguing that. That means that for some reason the majority of this country felt that maybe the alternative was worse. And they like Trump's ideas that are out of the box, that disrupt. And maybe when we look back at the Trump era in 10 years, from 20 years, we'll look at it, you know what? Trump was part of a disruption that was necessary in the year 2025 that helped the world come to a new place. I look at the big picture. I don't see Trump as a disaster, and I don't see him as a savior, as you put it. He is a president of the most powerful country, and I think some of what he's done, I think, will go down as being tremendously powerful for things, and some of what he does may be failures and may be forgotten in a while from now. So I don't get caught up in the day-to-day. I think following the media hour by hour just makes you neurotic, and you need more therapy for that, to be very honest. It's just too,
Rabbi, I remember doing a show. We did a show a few years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, that was very impactful for me and the evolution of this program around David HaMelech, around King David, and how we look at our leaders, are they infallible or not, and that was a particularly controversial
of course I remember.
Yeah. And I remember you making a statement around that relates to something you said earlier about how our leaders are agents of the grand plan, and Hashem's world. And I think it was on that show, either I posed or a listener posed a question, well, what about, Hitler? What about the most horrible figures in history? And right. I remember it struck me like even those, those truly evil characters are still part of some plan. It's a difficult one to understand, but it's still part of Hashem's world. And I think that itself, and maybe I'm a simpleton, or I take my theology in a naive way, but that's very valuable in the way I process this, wherever I am politically. When there's something that really strikes me, I'm very excited about, or I'm repulsed by. And when you put it that way, that maybe this is a disruption that's needed, it takes it out of the personal and makes it more kind of cosmic. And anyway, I find that helpful.
I think what you're saying is right on target. That's exactly how I think. And it takes us back to perspective. I think this is a fresh perspective that you don't hear. When you watch the news, whatever news, whether it's Fox or CNN or MSN, whatever it may be, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, you all hear about is the moment. What's happening right now? The latest press conference, the questions. The bigger picture was always what Judaism, the Jews were able, and the Jews were suffering terribly in Egypt. And in any situation, the only thing that was their salvation was that they knew there's a bigger picture and there's a bigger narrative. And I think there's a bigger narrative here as well. That's how I look at everything that's going on. I always think, what is the bigger story here? It's the only way to make it, because the moments, Kierkegaard put it this way. He said, you can only understand life backwards, but you have to live life frontwards. We don't see tomorrow. We don't see the next day. But when you look back, you suddenly say, hey, even the setbacks and even the things that I did not like became part of my narrative. In some way, that's what helped me grow. That's what helped me become who I am. And I really firmly believe that. Now, if I thought that Trump was Hitler, God forbid, and he's not, it's another story. I don't see that way. You know what I mean? People told me Trump is going to put you away. They kept saying, why don't you realize how kind of anti-Semite he is? I mean, when I start hearing that stuff...
I think it's important for people to hear that you're not giving blanket guidance anyway. You're not saying, well, accept or reject anything this person says. What I've always heard you say is critically analyze, think about, and don't prejudge. And I think that. So look, if there can be things, I can hold space for total contradiction as it relates to someone's social political views. I can have something that at any moment I'm vehemently against, and maybe I'm advocating even spending resources in my life to politic against, and something that comes from the same source, from the White House, let's say in this example, that I'm totally for. And it's okay to have those contradictions. Anyway, I want to take our last break, and Rabbi, and after I'm going to try to do that redirection, if you don't mind. So grateful to have you on, Rabbi Simon Jacobson, the director of the Meaningful Life Center, eminent religious scholar of our time, and we'll be right back. We're talking about Gaza, as we've done a few times over the last year. Specifically in this case, we cheekily named the program tonight the United States of Gaza, actually after President Trump's announcement on Tuesday that the U.S. was going to, quote-unquote, take over the Gaza Strip. We'll be right back.
You see, it's not me, it's not my family. In your head, they are fighting with their tanks.
Equal Footing has been brought to you almost since the beginning of our program by Mechanical Art Capital. Mechanical Art Capital is a very specific and simple business. It gives you money if you are a watch dealer or a watch collector, simply based on your inventory. It's halachically sound. It is not a loan. It's an inventory buyback program. It's very reasonable in terms of its financing cost. If you're a mid-size or even small watch dealer, take advantage of it. Even if you're a collector, get cash in your pocket for your collection or your inventory. How easy is it? You can get an offer in 5 minutes. Go to your app store and put in 3 words, Mechanical Art Capital, or go to their website, mechanicalartcapital.com. You just upload a couple of photos or videos of your watches. You get an indicative offer right away, and you get money in your pocket the next day. mechanicalartcapital.com.
I've been caught, but I'm keeping on to. And I've been told.
Rabbi, we got a response from Peter, the listener, who asked the question earlier.
Okay. What's the response?
He said the reason I asked the question is actually, and you probably wouldn't guess it, that I am pro-Trump generally. But I think by some of the things he says that are so absurd are simply distractions. And it takes away from a core message and ultimately dilutes his efficacy. That's why I asked the question.
Okay, so he's a human being, and we know he's not a saint. I don't know why he said it. I'm not sure. Maybe there is some calculation that we'll figure out. Like I said, maybe it's a negotiating tool. And that's all I have to say. So if it's a distraction, let's treat it as such, and let's move on. Let's not focus on it.
If you weren't listening earlier in the program, what our listener is talking about is Trump's recent announcement that he thought Canada should be the 51st state of the U.S. Rabbi, I'm going to do like a super hard right turn. I don't mean that politically. I'm going to try to redirect him for a minute. This week's Parsha, B'Shalach, is about a lot of miracles, right? I mean, it's some tough stuff. The Pharaoh pursuing the Israelites. Obviously, we're in the desert. Maybe we're not so far from the Gaza Strip in this story geographically. You have the manna coming from heaven, and what struck me, I've never read this parsha in this way, is the fine line of perception between miracle and curse, or between good and bad. And so you have the manna that's ultimately, is it our own, stores in a bottle as proof for the future generations? I may be getting that wrong. But there's this obvious blessing of the manna coming from heaven as sustenance. And at the same time, there's a rejection of it, right? It tastes bad. It's like you can almost feel between the lines of the page the people of Israel seeing it the opposite. What is this horrible tasting thing that is being put upon us? And so when these big things happen in the world, how do we know what's a blessing and what's a curse? Like this type of announcement. I mean, with all due respect to your intellect or mine or looking at this, we don't know. We don't know, in a sense, whether this crazy statement of the U.S. taking over the Gaza Strip, is this going to set in motion shalom in the Middle East, or is it going to set in motion more chaos and suffering? How do you distinguish outside of the intellect at kind of an intuitive or spiritual level as a Jew, and in understanding what's coming at you? Is it a blessing or a curse?
Well, remember, we spoke earlier about trust in God. The Jewish people, always looking at the bigger picture, didn't always understand what was happening, but they always trusted that it's ultimately going to lead to a positive place. So even when they were suffering in Egypt, and even during the Holocaust, where there was such horrible 6 million Jews in the worst possible way, but there was still that faith and hope that ultimately we will get out of this God-forsaken place. And look what happened. A few years later, the State of Israel was born. You have a renaissance of Jewish life in Israel and around the world.
Yeah.
Even though everyone had given up on us. So I think we have to think of it that way. Obviously, we have to do whatever is possible right now with the natural means, with our intelligence. Hopefully here, Trump does shake up the whole status quo and solutions begin to be offered. But we have to remember, at the end of the day, we firmly believe that there will be a good ending for everyone involved. Because remember, it's win-win. It can't be peace for one side if there isn't peace for the other side. Unfortunately, and I say this without hesitation, the biggest enemy of the Palestinians are not the Israelis. It's their own people. It's the people that have held them hostage, that have not allowed. Imagine those billions of dollars would have gone, instead of building tunnels and planning an attack and taking hostages, would have been to build up the infrastructure, the schools, And yes, they would have turned, let's say, Gaza into a Riviera on the Mediterranean. Imagine what kind of life they would be living now. You know, so it's easy to just scapegoat Israel, that Israel is doing it all to us. You know, the Germans did to us the worst possible thing, but we never said we're victims of the Germans. We went ahead and built a country, and built a powerful country. So the real shake-up here has to be that the Arab-Muslim world has to start taking responsibility, and it's going to be in a peaceful way. It's not going to be through using Israel as a scapegoat. So I think that is going to be, some way or another, it's going to happen. It'll be perhaps the Abraham Accords. I can assure you that Saudi Arabia wants to make peace with Israel. You know, but they know their people are going to resist. So they have to play the game.
It's interesting you should use the word scapegoat, which is obviously from Leviticus. It's a biblical concept. But a number of Israeli observers have suggested that Trump, with his recent announcement, could be using a negotiating tactic that's known in Israel. You probably know the term in Hebrew is like putting in a goat, where you're laying down a demand for the purpose of removing it later and appearing to grant us a concession. So it may also have a negotiating role. Rabbi, you know, you have a through line over the years around that trust in Hashem, even in the most difficult circumstances. And it's a bit of an awkward tie-down here as we enter the show, but I was very, shortly before we went on air, I was skiing, because I'm in a different time zone in the western U.S., and I love to ski. It's one of my favorite things to do in the world. And my wife is a beginner skier, and it's her second season. And we went all the way to the top of the mountain. She came all the way down. We even thought we might miss the start of the show. And she was like, I never want to do this again. This was so difficult, like having PTSD, like about the experience. Like, but she did, it was this amazing. I could even see it with my eyes. This experience of like overcoming and working through and coming out on the other side. And it's so. You talked about the Kierkegaard quote. We look back and we see clearly, what did I need to go through to get here? What were the things that brought me higher and made me stronger and more skilled and so forth? But in the moment, it's so damn hard. It's so damn hard in the moment when you're falling down in the mountain and it's cold and so forth to know, oh, this is for a higher purpose. Oh, this is going to get me to some other side. And so the key isn't afterwards, right? It's like while it's happening.
Are you using this show to manipulate your wife?
I hope not. Maybe subconsciously, maybe so she won't be as upset with me. No, but I was trying to tie it to this in the sense that I feel like, okay, we get all up in arms. Something like this happens, and some people say it's ethnic cleansing, and other people say, oh, let's take over Gaza tomorrow and so forth. But this disruption, this turn, stirring the pot, hopefully it brings us to a better place. And anyhow.
I'm confident it's going to bring us to a better place. I have no question in my mind that the Middle East will make peace. Remember this, the Christians attacked the Jews and also Muslims over the years in the most crazy ways. And yet, Christianity has become tamed. The United States is a country that is now a role model. I'm not saying it's perfect. So I believe Islam will ultimately go through a market correction. That's the way to put it. Oh. And there will be true peace in Israel.
Amen.
And in the Middle East.
Amen. Yeah. Rabbi, I want to honor you and thank you for getting in the program and such a tough subject, going towards it instead of shying away from it. Rabbi Simon Jacobson, thank you for being on.
Thank you for having me, and we should only hear good news.
I can't remember anything. Can't tell if this is true or a dream. Deep down inside I feel the scream. This terrible silence stops in me. Now that the war is through with me, I'm waking up, I cannot see that there's not much left of me. Nothing is real but pain.